The day Brenda Kilpatrick torched my great-grandfather's corn barn, she had no idea she was about to face a federal judge, the man who sent an entire county commission to prison for 23 years combined. I'm standing here at 5:47 in the morning, my boots grinding through charred timber that still radiates heat, breathing a choking mix of burned oak, century-old corn dust, and diesel. Brenda thought she was eliminating an eyesore. What she actually did was hand me a federal case so airtight it would destroy not just her, but the entire corruption network she'd been feeding for years. This smiling HOA president made one catastrophic error. She Googled retired judge and figured I was some harmless old man who'd roll over. She never checked my specialty, dismantling corrupt officials who abuse power for profit. My name is Thaddeus Brennan. And 3 years ago I thought I was done sending people to prison. 27 years on the federal bench teaches you to spot corruption from a mile away. But after watching my wife Margaret lose her battle with cancer, I figured it was time to find peace on the 47 acres my grandfather Seamus left me in Millfield County, Iowa. Seamus Brennan arrived from County Cork in 1948 with nothing but Purple Heart shrapnel in his leg and hands that knew how to build things that lasted. That corn barn went up in 1952, every beam hand-cut from Iowa oak, every joint fitted so tight you couldn't slide a dime between them. 70 years later, those weathered walls still held the sweet smell of dried corn and the ghost of his pipe tobacco. I moved there thinking retirement meant restoring tractors, growing corn, and enjoying the kind of bone-deep silence you only get when your nearest neighbor is a quarter-mile away. What I didn't expect was that quarter-mile to be packed with 847 identical McMansions called Millfield Estates, all controlled by a woman who could teach Machiavelli lessons in ruthless power. Brenda Kilpatrick didn't just run the Millfield Estates HOA. She owned it like a personal kingdom. Picture 5'6" of razor-sharp authority wrapped in designer suits, always clutching a clipboard like it contained state secrets. Her pristine white Mercedes matched her bleached smile. And when those stiletto heels hit pavement, they clicked out a rhythm that sounded exactly like a countdown timer. Her first royal visit came on a crisp September morning while I was coaxing my grandfather's John Deere back to life. I was elbow-deep in the carburetor when those heels started machine-gunning up my gravel driveway. She stood there staring at my freshly painted red barn like it was personally insulting her bloodline. Said the barn was an eyesore visible from 17 homes, destroying everyone's investment. I told her simply, "This is private agricultural property. Your HOA has exactly zero jurisdiction here." That's when her mask didn't just slip. It vaporized. Her voice dropped to a whisper that carried more menace than any federal sentencing I'd ever handed down. There are many creative solutions to problems that affect our community's prosperity. My old prosecutor instincts started screaming. Brenda was declaring war on someone she thought was a harmless retiree. She had no idea what she was walking into. Brenda's first creative solution arrived in the form of Dale Hoffman, the county code enforcement officer. Dale showed up clutching a clipboard thick enough to stop bullets, his hands shaking, listing 14 anonymous complaints in a single week: noise ordinances, dust control, rodent harboring, septic concerns. I'd seen enough terrified witnesses to know when someone was being squeezed. Dale eventually showed me his phone. A voicemail transcript from Brenda saying Randy's company had county projects coming up for bid and they valued working with cooperative officials. She just handed me a smoking gun with her fingerprints all over it. Right there I gave Dale a quick legal education. Iowa's Right to Farm Act, Chapter 352, creates an absolute shield against nuisance harassment targeting agricultural operations that predate surrounding development. My barn was literally older than both of us combined. Every single complaint he'd listed fell under nuisance ordinances. Dale spent the next 30 minutes photographing my completely ordinary farm equipment while I started building a federal case. Every harassment visit, every abuse of county resources, all going into a file getting fatter by the day. That evening Brenda called at exactly 8:47 p.m., and told me that people who insist on being difficult neighbors often discover their problems multiply exponentially. Another threat, delivered with the casual confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences. 3 decades of judicial authority leaked into my voice. "Miss Kilpatrick, some people's problems have a way of becoming everyone else's solutions." 10 days later, legal papers arrived. A lawsuit filed in district court demanding immediate demolition of my structurally dangerous agricultural facility and $50,000 in damages for diminished property values and severe emotional distress. The letterhead told the real story: Hawthorne Sterling and Associates, a Des Moines firm charging $800 an hour to steamroll rural communities. This was big league legal firepower. Someone was betting serious money to get rid of my barn. So I started digging into county records. And what I found made my blood pressure spike. Over 18 months, 3 shell companies had quietly purchased every piece of agricultural land within 2 miles of Millfield Estates. The purchasing agent on every single deed, Kilpatrick Development Solutions, LLC. They weren't eliminating an eyesore. They were assembling a 1,000-acre development empire, and my 47 acres sat right in the middle like a stubborn splinter. I called Michael Chin, my old law clerk, now Chicago's most feared civil rights attorney. Within 72 hours he'd filed a motion to dismiss plus a federal countersuit under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983. For anyone who doesn't know, Section 1983 strips government immunity from officials who violate constitutional rights under color of law, making them personally liable from their own pockets. Then FBI Special Agent Sarah Kowalski called back. We've been tracking a systematic land fraud operation across 6 Iowa counties. Rural property owners getting harassed into distressed sales, to shell companies connected to local officials. The targets, elderly farmers, veterans, and minorities. And the harassment pattern is identical every time. Your Brenda Kilpatrick just earned herself a federal investigation file. I took a drive through Millfield Estates and met Marcus Rodriguez, a young father pushing a stroller, whispering so Brenda's people couldn't hear. He'd been fined for leaving a basketball hoop up past sunset. For parking his work truck in his own driveway. His daughter got a violation notice for drawing hopscotch squares in washable chalk. He said half the neighborhood would throw a parade if someone finally took her down. Would you testify in federal court, Marcus? He said he'd crawl through broken glass for the chance. Over the following week my phone rang constantly. Mrs. Chin, an elderly widow, fined $200 for hanging laundry outside. Tom Patterson, a veteran, cited every time he parked his motorcycle. Brenda called it commercial equipment. Jennifer Walsh, a single mom, fined for a garden gnome Brenda claimed attracted the wrong element. And then Marcus called again, his voice tight with panic. Brenda had approached his wife at the grocery store and threatened to have his immigration status investigated. Marcus is a 20-year naturalized citizen with his certificate framed in the living room. Brenda was now threatening to weaponize federal agencies against a U.S. citizen for personal revenge. That's not just abuse of power. That's a federal crime in itself. At 3:17 in the morning I woke up to the smell of smoke. Orange glow where my grandfather's barn used to stand. The structure that had weathered 70 Iowa winters, sheltered 3 generations of corn harvests, survived the Dust Bowl and the farm crisis of the 80s, burning like a Viking funeral pyre. I stood there in my pajamas and felt something I hadn't experienced since my first day on the federal bench. The cold, focused fury that comes right before you destroy someone's entire world. I called Agent Kowalski first. Federal arson of a veteran's heritage property. I've got security footage. I've got motive. And I've got enough evidence of conspiracy to put this entire operation away for life. Then I called Michael. File a federal civil rights lawsuit so comprehensive it bankrupts everyone involved down to their grandchildren. While the fire department hosed down the smoldering remains, I was already building the end game. Digging through the original HOA incorporation documents, I found it, buried in Section 47C. A clause giving the HOA first right of refusal on any non-conforming property within 2 miles, at 60% of assessed market value. Every harassment, every bogus citation, every attempt to drive me off my land, it was all a systematic plan to force me to sell for pennies on the dollar. And the financial disclosures buried in the county clerk's office showed Brenda personally owned $2.3 million in stock in Heartland Development Corporation, the same company holding purchase options on my land and every other agricultural property they'd targeted. She wasn't a drunk-on-power HOA president. She was running a multi-million-dollar land fraud operation. Time to end it. When Agent Kowalski arrived at 7:15 a.m., I handed her a thick folder and said 3 words. I believe we need to discuss RICO charges. By 8 a.m. my dining room had become a federal war room. FBI agents, evidence boxes, financial flowcharts tracing a spider web across 4 states. Meanwhile Brenda doubled down on desperation. She tried to bribe me with a county commissioner in my kitchen, recorded every word. She tried to have me committed for psychiatric evaluation, signed by a judge who happened to be the commissioner's nephew. And she ran a sophisticated PR campaign with fabricated audio recordings claiming I had cognitive decline. The FBI traced the recording studio payment directly to Kilpatrick Development Solutions. But every retaliation created new federal witnesses. Every abused power generated new victims willing to testify. The case was building itself. The monthly HOA meeting was selected as the moment of public reckoning. 437 people crammed into a space designed for 200. Livestream. State representatives. Regional media. FBI agents positioned throughout the crowd as concerned residents. Brenda called the meeting to order in her most expensive Armani suit, still confident, still in control. She started talking about harassment campaigns by certain individuals. I stood up in the back. Walked to the podium carrying my grandfather's charred hammer in a clear evidence bag. Set it on the podium. The sound of blackened oak hitting wood echoed through the room. Agent Kowalski rose and identified herself. This meeting just became a federal evidence-gathering session. I projected Brenda's financial records onto the community center screen. Bank transfers. Shell company documents. Kickback payments. Then I played her own voice from the bribery recording. We have the ability to make your legal problems disappear. The silence that followed was so complete you could hear people breathing. Agent Kowalski stepped forward. Brenda Kilpatrick, you're under arrest for conspiracy, mail fraud, wire fraud, bribery, obstruction of justice, and violation of civil rights under color of law. As she was led away in handcuffs, I leaned into the microphone one last time. Mrs. Kilpatrick, you once told me there were creative ways to solve community problems. Turns out you were right. Though I don't think federal prison was quite what you had in mind. 6 months later, I stood where my grandfather's barn had burned, watching a crew of volunteers raise the frame for its replacement. The morning air carried the sweet scent of fresh-cut oak and the sound of hammers ringing against nails, the same sounds Seamus would have heard 70 years ago. Brenda Kilpatrick, 12 years federal prison, $2.1 million in restitution, plea deal on racketeering and civil rights violations. Commissioner Fitzpatrick, 8 years. The entire corruption network, 14 local officials and business owners, gone. The new HOA board, led by Marcus Rodriguez, implemented radical reforms that became a model across Iowa. Term limits, financial transparency, open meetings, and independent ombudsman. The legal clinic I established in the rebuilt barn handled over 200 cases in our first year. Turns out there were a lot of Brendas out there, and they all share the same weakness. They cannot handle organized resistance. If you've got your own HOA nightmare, drop it in the comments. Bullies only win when good people stay quiet. Subscribe and hit the bell. Next week I'm telling you about the small-town mayor who tried to steal a veterans memorial and how one determined Gold Star mother brought down his entire administration. Some battles are worth fighting no matter how long they take.